Cassie Hillman had always been fond of Lilac Lane. From its tidy rows of lavender-blooming bushes to the tree-lined sidewalks dotted with small white picket fences, the lane was a peaceful haven. She loved the slow, gentle pace of the neighborhood. Nothing too exciting ever happened except the occasional block party or church fundraiser. But all that changed the day she started noticing that every dog she cared for returned home with a peculiar item. As a professional pet sitter, Cassie often juggled multiple households' canine companions. She was the favorite go-to for dog walking and short-term care whenever neighbors went on errands or vacations. Her cheerful disposition and knack for making pets feel safe earned her a sterling reputation. Early one Tuesday morning, she arrived at Miss Barry's brick mansion. The large century-old house loomed behind manicured hedgerows. Inside, the docile but enormous Newfoundland named Moose ambled in the foyer, tail thumping happily at Cassie's arrival. He was always excited to see her, especially when it meant a trip outside around the block. "Oh, Moose, we're going to see what mischief you can get up to this time," she said, giving Moose a long brown hair into a messy ponytail. Cassie guided him out the front door. The crisp air held the scent of fresh mulch and faint lilac blooms. It was truly a picture-perfect day for a dog walk. They took their usual route, saying quick hellos to friendly neighbors along the way. At one point, Moose busied himself sniffing an old oak tree on the corner of Walnut and Lilac Lane. Cassie, absent-mindedly humming a tune, tugged the leash gently to signal they should continue, but Moose refused to move from a tuft of grass beneath the tree. He tugged until Cassie relented and let him thoroughly investigate whatever had caught his attention. Finally, Moose lifted his shaggy head, something small and shiny in his mouth. "Moose, drop it," she said, though not in an overly stern voice. Moose let the object fall gently into her hand. Cassie brushed off a little dirt to reveal a tarnished silver shard that looked like a piece from a larger piece of jewelry. Intrigued, she slipped it into her pocket, thinking perhaps it had broken off a lawn ornament or some other decoration. The day proceeded normally. Cassie walked 2 more dogs, Sparky, the energetic beagle, and Rosie, the sweet West Highland terrier. By the time the evening rolled around, she was due to pick up Toby, an elderly dachshund, from Mr. Gallagher's house. Toby loved slow strolls around the block, hardly energetic, but that was part of his charm. Sure enough, he proved just as inquisitive. He trotted to the base of that same oak tree, rearing his tiny paws against the trunk. He sniffed around, and this time he clamped his jaws on a peculiar little key. Cassie gently pried it from his mouth. She lifted the old key, its metal worn on the edges, but the handle intricately carved with a small rose design. She looked back at Toby in mild surprise. What were the odds that both dogs found odd trinkets near the same spot? At home that evening, Cassie placed the silver shard and the key on her kitchen counter. Thoughts began to swirl. What if the silver shard was part of something bigger? And what about this key? She turned them over and over, holding them up to the light. Both were old, definitely not items someone might casually drop. Lilac Lane wasn't known for random bits of valuables lying around. She sighed, deciding she would ask around the next day to see if anyone recognized them. As the week progressed, she scheduled pet visits throughout the neighborhood as usual. Each time, something odd happened. Every dog seemed to bring her a small relic, a piece of metal, an antique bead, a chipped cameo face carved from mother of pearl. By the end of the week, Cassie had gathered 6 distinct fragments. She set them out on her dining table, carefully sorting through them or trying to fit them together like a puzzle. It was the cameo face that finally caught her attention. She had read once about cameo brooches, intricately carved with profiles of women in white or cream against a colored backdrop. This cameo piece was delicate. It depicted a woman's silhouette, but the rest was missing. It was as if a circle around the carved head had been shattered. Cassie called her friend Anna Farnsworth, who happened to be the local historical society's youngest volunteer. Anna had grown up in the area, inheriting her grandmother's love of Lilac Lane history. If anyone could identify these bits of antiquity, it would be Anna. They met at Cassie's kitchen table. Anna studied each piece, carefully turning them in her slender fingers. She was a pretty woman with auburn hair and green eyes that sparkled whenever she was on the verge of a discovery. "These are all parts of something," Anna said. "This cameo face, this tarnished silver. These might be pieces broken off an old brooch or necklace. And the key. I'm not entirely sure, but it might fit a jewelry box. The design is quite old." Cassie felt a thrill that her hunch was correct. "But I don't recall hearing about any lost heirloom in the neighborhood," she said. "Lilac Lane's a quiet place. Why would something so cherished be scattered around the street?" Anna shrugged thoughtfully. "Objects usually get lost or stolen. If there's a missing heirloom, we need to see who might have had one in the first place. I'll check the archived records at the Historical Society. If the family was local, it might be documented." The next day, Cassie went about her regular dog-sitting routines. She couldn't help but glance every so often at that old oak tree. What was it about that spot that kept drawing the dogs there? Then, mid-afternoon, while caring for a lively golden retriever named Buster, she discovered him pawing at the base of the trunk. He surfaced with a tiny clasp, the sort used to hold a brooch in place on a piece of clothing. By now, Cassie was practically trembling with curiosity. When Anna called back that evening, Cassie picked up on the first ring. "You won't believe it," Anna said. "I think I've found something relevant. It's about the Barry family. They were a founding family of Lilac Lane. There was an heirloom, a cameo brooch, inherited by each generation's eldest daughter. The brooch vanished about 50 years ago. The entire Barry family was devastated, as it held deep sentimental value. According to the records, the cameo was rumored to have been stolen during a burglary. No one ever recovered it." Cassie's eyes darted to her dining table. "Miss Barry Moose's owner must be related to that family. I know she inherited that big house, but I never heard her mention a missing cameo. Do you think the items these dogs have found could be pieces of that brooch?" Anna exhaled excitedly. "It all fits. The cameo face, the silver setting, the clasp. It's definitely a broken cameo brooch. But the question remains, why now? And why at that oak tree?" Cassie decided to approach Miss Barry the next evening. She couldn't just gleefully declare she was piecing together an old heirloom. She had to be cautious. This was a family matter, and Miss Barry was known for being reserved. So, after walking Moose as usual, Cassie lingered in the foyer, letting the massive dog settle in for a nap. "Miss Barry, may I ask you something?" Cassie began, fiddling with the leash. "I've come across some odd items near that big oak tree. Pieces of something that might have once been a cameo brooch. Anna Farnsworth thinks it might be the Barry family heirloom." Miss Barry, a dignified woman in her 60s, stood perfectly still for a moment. Her eyes, a soft grey, slowly widened. "Good heavens," she said at last, her voice trembling. "You don't mean the cameo that went missing decades ago?" "My grandmother's cameo." Gently, Cassie retrieved the bag of small fragments from her purse. She carefully laid each piece out on the coffee table. Miss Barry sank onto the nearest chair, like her legs could no longer support her. She reached out a trembling hand to pick up the cameo's carved face. A tear glistened in her eye. "It's her," Miss Barry whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Or what's left of her. I recognize that silhouette of my grandmother, Paige Barry. She was said to have had her likeness carved in cameo form as a gift from her father. Where? How?" Cassie explained how 6 different dogs had each discovered a fragment. She assured Miss Barry that she and Anna were determined to discover who scattered these pieces, and why. Miss Barry nodded as she composed herself. "No one has spoken of it in years. My mother told me the cameo was stolen during a break-in, but the culprit was never found. At the time, there were whispers it might have been a neighbor, but there was no evidence. The cameo was gone, and so was the possibility of its safe return." She rose from her chair, crossing over to a small bookshelf. From it, she pulled a faded photograph in a metal frame. This photo shows the cameo in one piece. See the immaculate detail on the silver filigree around the carved face? It was such a treasured possession in our family. Cassie noted the photograph. The cameo was large, with ornate silver scrolls framing the oval cameo at its center. "I want to help you figure out how it ended up hidden around that oak tree," she said softly. Miss Barry took a deep breath. "If you're willing, I'd appreciate it. It's odd that these fragments have resurfaced now. Has anything else odd been going on?" Cassie shook her head. "No. The only clue is that each dog seems drawn to that oak tree. Anna and I will do more digging. We'll keep you updated." The following day, Cassie and Anna decided to do a thorough check of the immediate vicinity around the oak tree, hoping to locate any remaining pieces. Armed with flashlights, they examined the gnarled roots and leaf litter. Children passing by on their bikes slowed, curious to see Cassie and Anna on their hands and knees. A couple of older neighbors asked what they were doing, but Anna politely explained they were looking for a missing item. After searching the area around the trunk, near a hedge, and even a few paces behind the tree, Cassie let out a small, triumphant sound. She lifted a piece of hinged silver. "Anna, look. This must be what closes around the cameo face," Cassie said. They set it aside, resuming the hunt. Nearby, Anna discovered two partial loops that might have been part of a chain or decorative swirl. Carefully, they placed the new finds into a small cloth bag. They were nearing the trunk again when Cassie noticed something partially buried. She brushed away dirt to reveal an old, leather-bound box, almost rotted through, corners chewed by insects and time. Anna's eyes widened. Could that be a jewelry box? Gingerly, Cassie opened the box, but it appeared empty except for dried leaves and dust. A faint imprint in the velvet lining looked like a shape once cradled there, a cameo or pendant, perhaps. The box was missing its key, which Cassie realized she had found with Toby. It must have been the original lock for this box. Despite the excitement of the new discoveries, Cassie felt a growing perplexity. Who hid the cameo in this box? Why bury it at the base of the oak tree? Could the cameo have been broken before it was buried? Or did the burial cause the cameo to decay over time? With the new pieces in tow, Anna and Cassie returned to Miss Barry's house. The woman greeted them eagerly, her eyes bright with hope. They set the items on a velvet cloth on the coffee table. Miss Barry's lips pursed as she gently turned each piece in her hands. "It appears the cameo was shattered, possibly on purpose," she said softly. "Or maybe it broke over time, as the ground and moisture took their toll. But who would steal it only to bury it?" Cassie asked quietly. Miss Barry folded her hands around the cameo face, tears glistening in her eyes. "Years ago, my grandfather suspected one of the neighbors, but the police found no proof. Now it seems someone took the cameo, stashed it in this box, and buried it outside to keep it hidden long enough for suspicion to fade." Anna said, "We should look into who lived in the neighborhood 50 years ago, besides your family. Maybe someone had a motive." Miss Barry nodded. "I can get you the original police report from my family's archive, plus any old diaries or notes my grandparents might have left. Someone must have wanted to keep this cameo out of sight." A few hours later, armed with the documents Miss Barry had found, Cassie and Anna sat in Cassie's cozy living room, the cameo fragments spread on her coffee table again. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle sat on a side table next to them, ironically mirroring the mysterious puzzle they were trying to piece back together. Using the old police report, they compiled a list of neighbors living on Lilac Lane at that time. One name jumped out: Hector Morris, who had resided right next to the oak tree. The oak tree itself sat on a small patch of communal land, but Hector's property abutted it. He passed away some years before, leaving no immediate family. But there was another clue. Hector Morris once worked part-time as a groundskeeper at the Barry property. The police notes indicated that he had no alibi the night of the burglary, but no one could tie him conclusively to the crime. Cassie and Anna exchanged a glance. If Mr. Morris took it, Maybe he panicked about being caught and hid the cameo, Cassie theorized, then never came back for it. Anna continued. This might solve the question of how the cameo brooch ended up buried, but how did it break into so many pieces? They could only guess. Perhaps the cameo had shattered somewhere along the line as it was forced into the small box. Or maybe Mr. Morris hammered it apart, thinking smaller pieces would be easier to hide. However it happened, the cameo was lost until recently. Unearthed it. It took a few more weeks and a few more dog walks for Cassie to find the last piece, a small silver swirl that fit the cameo's outer circumference. Once all the fragments were arranged on a large tray, Miss Barry looked upon them with a mixture of sorrow and relief. Although the cameo was irreparably damaged, she had, in a way, gained closure for her family. The cameo wasn't simply banished forever. It had finally returned, piece by piece, carried by the neighborhood's beloved pets. Yet Cassie couldn't help a final pang of regret. Miss Barry would never be able to wear her grandmother's cameo the way her mother and grandmother had. Unless... Is it possible to have it restored? She asked one day, surprising Miss Barry in her study. A jeweler or restoration specialist might be able to fix it, if only for display. Miss Barry exhaled slowly, a faint glimmer of hope crossing her features. I never considered that. It's certainly worth a try. Even if it can't be exactly as it was, it would be wonderful to have the cameo face reset in silver. We'll make some calls, Cassie promised. Knowing how close Lilac Lane's residents were, Cassie enlisted Anna, and together they reached out to a renowned antique jewelry restorer in a nearby city. The man, Mr. Delgado, spoke with confidence over the phone and invited them to bring in the cameo pieces for an inspection. Cassie and Miss Barry went together, carefully bringing the bits in a velvet-lined box. Mr. Delgado, a short, grandfatherly gentleman, examined each fragment with a jeweler's lobe. He clicked his tongue thoughtfully, pausing to scribble notes. Finally, he looked up at Miss Barry with a gentle smile. This cameo is indeed quite old. The mother-of-pearl cameo face is chipped around the edges, but the carving is largely intact. It can be repolished, though the original cameo lines might be slightly uneven. I can mold a new silver setting and incorporate the surviving silver filigree pieces. It won't be the same cameo that left your family's possession, but it'll be a wonderful tribute. Overwhelmed, Miss Barry nodded. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Please do your best. We'll do all we can, he said with a kind tilt of his head. The following weeks passed in quiet anticipation. Cassie resumed her regular pet-sitting duties, all the while entertaining questions from curious neighbors. News had spread that the Barry cameo had been unearthed. Many were astonished to learn that the dogs of Lilac Lane had been the unwitting detectives. In fact, folks began remarking that Lilac Lane's canines had done more for local mysteries than anyone else in half a century. Finally, Mr. Delgado called with the results. The day Cassie turned up to retrieve the restored cameo with Miss Barry, her heart pounded with anticipation. Mr. Delgado showed them the piece, gently cradling it in a small velvet box. It was not a perfect cameo, slight cracks still radiated out from the central carving, but it was polished and reset in gleaming silver, gracefully displaying its historical charm. Miss Barry wept softly, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. I never thought I would see this cameo again. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. And thank you, Cassie, for all your help. Cassie smiled, her own eyes warm with tears. It was Moose and Toby and all the other dogs who truly found it, she said, trying to lighten the moment. But I'm just glad your family's heirloom is home. On the way back to Lilac Lane, Miss Barry settled the velvet box carefully in her purse. She wore a serene look, as though a great burden had finally been lifted. I'll make sure the cameo is passed down properly now, with a note explaining its history. Future generations will know how it was lost, how it was found, and perhaps it'll serve as a reminder that the truth always has a way of surfacing. When they arrived back at Miss Barry's estate, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the brick walls and rose bushes in the yard. Moose greeted Cassie with a happy bark. Even as Cassie patted his massive head, she could scarcely believe it had been less than a month since he'd first brought her that tarnished silver shard. "Thank you, Moose," she whispered in his ear, which caused his tail to wag. "You've been quite the hero." The days that followed were filled with a new sense of camaraderie along Lilac Lane. Neighbours congratulated Miss Barry on the cameo's safe return, and soon the story took on a slightly humorous tone, how the local dogs became accidental treasure hunters. Cassie continued her pet sitting with a renewed sense of joy, grateful that the tight-knit community banded together to solve an old mystery and bring closure to a grieving family. One afternoon, Miss Barry invited Cassie for tea. The fragrance of lilacs drifted through the open windows in the drawing room. Cassie was admiring a newly framed photograph of the restored cameo when Miss Barry entered carrying the original black and white photo of her grandmother. Gently, she placed it next to the cameo's photograph. "It's funny," Miss Barry said, brushing invisible motes of dust off the frame. "I feel as if my grandmother is finally at peace. Perhaps wherever she is, she knows her cameo is back in the family." Cassie sipped her tea, the steam warming her face. "I imagine she's quite proud," she said sincerely. "And now maybe the dogs of Lilac Lane can go back to bringing home squeaky toys instead of relics." Miss Barry laughed, a soft and musical sound that Cassie rarely heard from the usually reserved woman. "Maybe you do have an excellent eye for shiny trinkets." Before Cassie left that day, Miss Barry pressed a small envelope into her hand. "Open it at home," she instructed. Her eyes shone with gratitude. Later, in the quiet comfort of her living room, Cassie carefully tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note thanking her for her help, along with a small pin replicating the cameo shape in enamel. An elegant, simplified version of the Barry cameo. It was inscribed on the back with a tiny paw print, a nod to the canine detectives who had made it all possible. Looking at the pin, Cassie's heart swelled with warmth. She fastened it to her lapel, smiling at how life in Lilac Lane had turned so unexpectedly adventurous. Tomorrow she'd walk Moose, Toby, Sparky, Rosie, and all the others once more, but with a renewed appreciation for the gentle secrets hidden in every corner of the neighborhood. Lilac Lane might be a quiet place most of the time, but beneath its calm exterior lay generations of stories waiting to be uncovered, even by the friendly neighborhood dogs. There in her cozy, lamplit living room, Cassie felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced in any other neighborhood. The cameo was back where it belonged, and Lilac Lane felt all the more vibrant for its discovery. She had no doubt that sooner or later, another mystery might crop up, and when it did, the dogs would probably be the first to know. She thought again of how it all began. One curious Newfoundland, sniffing around an old oak tree, unearthing a tiny piece of someone's family treasure. It was the quietest sort of magic, and it reminded Cassie that even in the small wonders of everyday life, like caring for dogs, sipping tea, or strolling down a path of lilac blooms, there could be a hidden piece of history, a fleeting chance at making a difference, and a story waiting to be told.